Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Stevens, and this is the Psychology to Live By podcast. Welcome to Psychology to Live By. Today is a Q&A with some remarkable personalities from network music. Our topic is, can we change personality? And we're joined today by Terry McBride, the CEO, Colleen Novak, Artist Manager, Chris Norwood, Head of Strategy, and Karen Mix, Director of People Operations. And our wonderful participants have watched the podcast of that name, which you can see or listen to at my website, drchris.life, or wherever you get your podcasts. But I'll do a quick summary now before we get into our roundtable. This podcast, Can You Change Your Personality, is part 2 of a series of 3 on personality. And it begins with a brief summary of what personality is, especially seeing it as a preference system that is pre-conscious. I then focus on the deeply debated question of whether you can substantially change your personality. Recent research suggests by mindfully practicing alternative approaches, you can somewhat recalibrate the expression of your underlying personality. It is not wholesale change. That doesn't mean it's not incredibly helpful. Typically, we seek to change our personality when our natural preferences lead to troubles, especially where our egocentric bias leads us into righteousness and conflict. Moderating these mismatches between personality and the world is a great idea. This then leads to the idea that character is what results from this kind of intentional, mindful practice. An analogy is made with computing, that personality is akin to the computer's operating system, and recalibration is like a software patch applied to fix glitches. Finally, I discuss how this recalibration and character change can have deep moral implications, a topic that I'll take up in the third podcast. But now to my good friends from Network Music, and here they are, beautifully arrayed. How are we all today?
No complaints.
No complaints, yes.
Nobody would listen anyway.
No. Sadly, that's true. Yes, in Australia, we also use the negative to describe how we are. Not bad, This is the second in the series, of course. We had a very vibrant discussion, if I remember rightly, for part 1. This is a shorter podcast, but I think a consequential one. It's a big topic, this idea of, can I change my personality? So, as always, I'm curious. I want to know what you thought, what questions you have, any challenges you have for me. So who would like to kick off?
I can kick off.
Thank you, Colleen.
So throughout the podcast, what I kept thinking about was as people age, and then you did end up touching on it, but I was wondering
Yes.
about neuroplasticity, because that you just get more set in your ways, and that in good ways and bad ways, but it's very difficult to change somebody who's aging.
Now, can I just clarify something? When you said it's very difficult to change
Change
someone.
somebody. That didn't sound very good. To try to open their minds.
Yeah, so you are talking about other people, not self here.
No, of course not. I'm not aging.
So we should talk about both, I think. I would have thought by now, Colleen, not saying you're old or anything, would have thought by now you would have realised the futility of trying to change others.
There's always hope.
There is always hope. But there are some serious things here about the effects of aging on the brain and the ability to change, as well as the issue of change of personality over the lifespan, right? And so let's start with the aging brain. And I'm not aware of specific research on this, but I have a pretty strong view here that if we haven't done the hard yards of recalibrating ourselves earlier on, it gets harder and harder as we get older because the brain does become less flexible, right? So it's so I've always felt that as people age, they sort of divide into two camps. I'm really interested in your view. I don't think this is coming out of my psychological expertise, but the two camps are people who become more saint-like. They become better people. They become wiser. And the other camp is they just get worse. They become, they just regress to probably to some of the not so adaptive aspects of their personality, because it's easier. What do you reckon, guys? I mean, this is for you, Colin, but for everyone. Do you have the same view or a different view?
Different. What do you mean? The same view?
Well, do you reckon some people just get worse as they get older, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think politically, you can go down the political road and how some people can get, as you age, can get a little bit more specific about their beliefs. But I also think about simple things that, just going to the airport or just the daily routines have to be more specific and who they can see and maybe it's just confidence and comfort and
Yeah.
It's just safer.
Yeah, I think it's a slightly different issue. It's not. It may interact with personality. For example, if a person was low on openness to experience, then they're going to be, as they get older, it's going to be they're going to want to just do the same things and have routine over and over, right? If they're more introvert, going out could become more of a problem as they get older. If they're lower on agreeableness, or then they might not like being told what to do. If they're higher on, lower on stability, high on neuroticism, they could become more emotive, right? But I think you've hit the nail on the head there by talking about confidence. I think a general thing about when people are aging, this is not about personality, is about the loss of a sense of agency and control in the world. Their perceptual apparatus doesn't work as well. Their body, one loses confidence in one's body, like fear of falling over, all kinds of things. They process the world more slowly, perceptually. So it gets scarier, and getting an illness has more implications. Right. So, and the cognitive processing slows down. So often, the hearing might be degrading, the eyesight might be degrading. Sounds pretty grim, doesn't it? And, they might not follow. Yeah, look at Jerry. They might not follow what people are saying around them. So there can be a whole lot of reasons that people shrink, and become more resistant. Which can be very frustrating for the younger people around them. So I think that's part of it. But all of that suggests to me how important it is to do the hard yards earlier in life of developing, like if a person's not open to experience, maybe developing a bit more openness. If they're not, if they're a sensitive type of actually, on average across the lifespan, people who are higher on neuroticism tend to become a little less neurotic.
Yeah.
They sort of give up, worrying quite so much on average.
Well, and like you said about your public speaking, you have to push yourself. You have to challenge yourself a bit, and
Yes.
you don't ever lose the ability to
Yeah.
do those
Yeah. And
things.
I'm not going to lose that ability now because I've done it a lot.
Mhm.
But if I'd never done it, it's more likely I would have become more and more isolated, as a really quite a profound, naturally profound introvert. But, yeah, the issue of changing people, you know, I'm afraid, you know, as a therapist, you sort of start off with some sort of a variation on that theme, and you quickly realise you've got no power to do that. People change themselves, and they'll do that if they're really motivated to, and they have the ability. So, in the therapeutic game, we have a saying that as a therapist, you don't want to be the most motivated person in the room,
Mhm.
and often, there might be an elderly person in our life who we want to change, and they're not motivated to change, and so it's just a recipe for suffering for everyone concerned to be trying to urge them to change. We get frustrated, they get frustrated, and no good comes of it. So yeah,
You're saying that I can't integrate the phrase recalibrate your personality into my vernacular now? I can't tell people that.
no, you could try it, but I just don't think it'd go well.
All right.
Certainly not in the circumstances where you would be using that phrase.
Yeah, but I mean, this is why I mean, in a sense, we're starting to move a little bit into the topic matter of the third podcast, which is going to be about morality and the development of character. Um, I think it's a super, super important topic. And it's natural that it flows out of this topic about whether we can change personality. But it's my experience that the changes that we can make, in the sense that of what I call recalibration, they're still very, very significant, especially when you're in relationship with someone and you see that effort to change and it's genuine, even though it might only be small, it's really significant to their partner, for example. If we're vaguely realistic, we know our partner's not going to completely change their personality. But largely what we want is we want to see them trying. And even if they that they're only modest gains, that means a lot to us. So there's that as well. I think, Colin, to come back to you, there's a bit of a sense of you're feeling the resistance of the other person to making any efforts towards recalibration, and that's what, as we say in the vernacular, gives you the shits.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to give up on them, but it's also
No, yeah, but again, if they're not motivated to change, or people double down as well. Like when they feel like they're being judged, because we talked about egocentric bias and righteousness. Like when people they actually double down about not changing, so it runs counter to our intention, right? Because if we feel like a person, is judging us and wants us to change, well, damn them, I'm not going to change. Yeah, but there'll be, if there were millions of people listening to this podcast, there'd be millions of people empathizing with you, Colleen. All right, who's next?
Well, I kind of tend a little bit counter to what Colleen was saying, and like when looking at it from have that the self-awareness piece, so from the self,
Yes.
but also like with age, as we age, I feel like we become much more comfortable with who we are. And then maybe that there is more of a opportunity to recognize when and how you want to curate your environment. Um, and so I'm curious, like for younger people, like do you think it's more difficult for somebody who has less life experience to be able to recalibrate or recognize that
Yeah,
they need a recalibration?
yeah, it's great. Yeah, the simple answer to that last question is yes, it is more difficult for younger people because I think it's only via experience that we get feedback about who we really are. And also, we get feedback about how other people are different and how there are other ways of being that are also legitimate. Yeah. So, you know, if you go right back to babyhood, it's really hard to tell, but it's babies probably don't have a really clearly defined even sense of their separateness to, they are the world is them, all right? And then they develop a sense of their separateness, as an individual, and the theory of mind that other people have different minds. So that sort of takes a while to stabilize, and then, so it's quite a ways down the track, if ever, that people then start to understand that they have a personality and other people have different personalities. The egocentric bias sort of blocks all that for a long time. And then, but gradually, because we have our higher consciousness, if I can put it that way, our sort of reflexive awareness, our meta cognition, our thinking about our own functioning, it starts to notice. He goes, oh yeah, I have features that other people don't have, and some other people don't like some of my features, and over time, it starts to appear like, well, it might be beneficial to me to make some changes so I fit in better in the world, right? And or there might even be a judgment that when I act in a certain way, one's own morality says, oh, I shouldn't do that. And so I will make changes to self. But it's really hard. I often say that the final frontier for all of us is appreciating and understanding how other people experience us. That comes in pretty late for most people, right? We generally, when people are upset with us, we generally think they've got us wrong, but they probably haven't. I mean, sometimes they have, of course, but it's on those occasions where you see a pattern where a number of people have read you the same way that is contrary to your self-understanding. That's when you go, uh-oh, maybe it's me. Yeah, which, of course, to your point, is impossible without experience. Yeah. Now, I just want to pick up something else that you said there. It's like more self-acceptance, I think you said, as you get older. I think there was a phrase,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah, you become more comfortable with
Yeah.
yourself. I feel like somewhere around 50, you're nowhere near there, Chris. Um, is like you pardon the like, but you have no more fucks to give, right? Like you're just like, I don't care what people think, and it's that like comfortableness in who you are.
Yeah. Okay, so this is curious because I agree with that. And I think understanding personality, a huge part of that is accepting the way we are thrown to be in the world. Like, the way the genetics has endowed us with certain predispositions and biased ways of operating in the world. And, it's at some point we have to fully accept that. Now, that's a different thing to not seeing the need to recalibrate, as we've been talking about, right? So this is an interesting tension then, isn't it, about, because, people listening might go, hang on a second, if you just fully accept yourself, does that mean, bugger everyone else? There's no point in me recalibrating. There's no need for me to grow as a moral creature. And obviously I know that's not what you're saying. Yeah. So it's a really interesting one. maybe the way of threading that particular needle is to say that when we actually do fully accept ourselves, there's a certain humility with respect to that. Like, in other words, I see all my foibles as well as my strengths. I see my biases, I see the way that, and so I'm not going to continually beat myself up for that, but I am going to make sure that I don't make other people suffer on the account, So I think that's a way of threading that quite narrow needlehead. The other thing is, I think, sorry, I had two thoughts then. You saw me hesitate, right? I'll say the first thought and then maybe the second, I'm not sure. The first one is, over time, you probably figure out the kinds of people you like hanging around with, and the people it's just a waste of your existence. And that's a part of not giving, was it no more fucks to give, was it? Yeah. So that's a part of that. Caring less about the judgment of the village, as it were, but actually probably caring more about the judgment of significant individuals. Right? So there's a certain discernment. The other thought I had was, it's take a little longer, but it's probably worth it. There's a poem called An Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters by Portia Nelson. And I saw it in an introductory textbook to transactional analysis, which is a theory of interpersonal dynamics called TA, Parent-Adult-Child Model. But anyway, the poem goes like this. Chapter 1, it's quite short. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It's not my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend it's not there. I fall in again. It's still not my fault. It takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I fall in again. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. So, these emotional upsets obviously are the holes in the street. And at first we've got no idea. Then we're in denial. Then even when we start to understand it, it's such a deep habit, we keep falling in. Then gradually we can find a way of navigating it. It's almost like it's got a gravitational pull, but we manage not to fall in. And eventually we see it in advance and we think it's not even worth going there. So I think this sense of, the poem is getting at taking full responsibility for our emotionality, for our own upsets, and see it maybe, hopefully, progressively over life, seeing them earlier and earlier and deciding not to go there. I think there's something of that in what you're talking about, that we can fully accept our whole self, including our foibles and our biases and our petulance or whatever it is. But somehow in doing that, we're less likely to unload that on others and less likely to fall into unconscious upsets.
And there's recalibration, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's, as I said, I think in podcast 3, we'll be talking about the importance of recalibration. Because although I agree, it's, I think it's a good thing to not care so much what people think, but I think our maturing, our ultimate happiness, if it doesn't take into account other people, it's delusionary. So it's again one of those little paradoxes or tensions that our happiness actually depends on a way of taking care of people around us, at the same time as not caring so much about what they think. Yeah. All right. Who is next? Oh, looks like it's you, Chris.
Buckle up, folks. I got a bit of a wild ride here, I think.
Who would have thought?
I had the light bulb moment for me in this podcast happened is around the 15-minute mark. When I'm trying to remember the specifics, but the line that you said is that like when you realize that you and others don't choose their personalities, typically can start to lead to a sense of tolerance for the personalities of folks on the other side.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of two things. The first was, I don't know, and I'm sure we might have talked about this as a group, maybe on a podcast or off, but just that sense that like, we judge ourselves on our intentions, but we tend to judge others on the actions and results, right? So there's this like misalignment between the way that we think about ourselves and maybe our personalities and our behaviors
Yeah,
and the world outside.
We talked about it in terms of a thing called the fundamental attribution bias. Yeah, so it's a universal tendency. Yeah, and for the bad stuff, we blame circumstances for us.
Right.
But for other people, we blame their personality or their nature. And for good stuff, we credit it to our nature. And good stuff for others, we say circumstances.
That's right.
It's very ungenerous feature.
And it also reminded me of something a friend of mine's dad used to say when we would like be in high school and talking about, challenges that we might have with other people interpersonally. And he said, the things that the challenge that you have with people who don't have any insight on themselves is that they don't have the insight to realize that they don't have any insight on themselves. And anyway, these things are sort of threading together around something that you mentioned as well, Karen, which is like a self-awareness component, right? And that to looping it back to what you had said, which is sort of like this self-awareness of where our own personalities come from and how that may be, at the root a genetic kind of thing and everybody is inheriting these things. And it's got me thinking about self-awareness in the context of like, is there a personality type that is self-awareness entirely independent of your personality type? Do people at all ends of all of the different spectrums, all of the sort of big five things, are they equally likely to develop self-awareness of where they might land relative to others and where others might land? Or is there specific types of scores that lead to higher self-awareness? Like I said, buckle up.
It is something I've thought about, and I don't know whether I'm fully decided. That's the first thing to say. There are some obvious candidates here. You'd imagine that people who are higher on openness, for example, might be more inclined to entertain different views about self, right? Be more open to new ideas, new thoughts. And also, I would imagine that people who are less antagonistic might be more open to contrary views to self, But I'm just guessing. I don't know of any, and it could well be. There could be research on this very thing, right? Okay. There's a couple of things here. So, one of my gripes over the years as a psychologist working particularly in organisations, you come across all of these other types of personality questionnaires and systems, like the Myers-Briggs or the Disc or, Hogan's or whatever. There's a whole lot of them. And they have wildly varying, psychometric properties. They're not necessarily very valid or reliable, et cetera, et cetera. But one of my gripes has been that when consultants go into organisations, they don't want to give anyone, any individual, any people bad news. So no one ever gets a bad profile.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's just different, right? This is patently absurd, right? Because some people, it appears, are born sociopathic,
mm-hmm.
which is basically a type of personality, extremely low on agreeableness, low on conscientiousness, and probably too stable on emotions, right? And so I think there are profiles where it's harder to be a good person, right? Objectively harder. It's like in the rest of what we inherit. Some people are born with a propensity to much higher intelligence and some to much lower.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people are blessed with a physique that is magnificent, and most of us aren't. So I think that's a part of it. It's like I think it could be harder for some people to garner insight, but I think it's always going to interact with the person's environment and their life experience. So this is what I'm thinking. Was it in this one where I talked about you might have your favourite oligarch or star, or was that in this one? So what I was getting at there is if a person, for example, has the misfortune of being able to mould the world to fit in with their own personality preferences and biases, then there's probably no need to garner insight.
Right.
Because they're winning. There's a certain president that comes to mind. But it's true generally when people, become really rich. I think, what's that biblical saying about it's harder for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to pass through the gates of heaven, or something like that. Well, this is the psychology of that, right? So, I'm not committing too heavily on whether it's the specific profile, but I am saying definitely if you're not, and this comes back to what Karen was saying, if we're not getting feedback that contradicts our own self-view, we're very, very unlikely to garner self-insight and the necessary humility to see the need for recalibration.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like I say, though, I'm guessing it might be hard if you're not very open to experience, maybe not conscientious, and certainly not agreeable. There might be a sort of oppositional style that one naturally has with those things that stops you getting feedback. But that's a guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as confident about that. But it is a again it leads. I'm grateful for this question too, because I probably will try to traverse some of this terrain in the next podcast, because it's got huge moral implications. Should we judge? Like if someone murders someone, and then it's later discovered they've got a massive brain tumor that has generated the urge to kill. We have a very different view of that person than someone where there's no abnormalities, right? And our moral judgment on those it's simple to parse, right? But it's really tricky, isn't it? Are some people born bad?
Yeah.
This is a variation on, are we all as likely to be,
Self-aware.
Self-aware, saint-like, self-aware. And probably the answer is empirically no. But I wouldn't say it's hopeless for anyone, but very, very, very much harder for some. If a person is either born or has terrible childhood circumstances and that really does them a lot of damage, then I think objectively it can be much harder it's too threatening to have that kind of self-awareness. Yeah. Massive question though. We've just been tiptoeing around the edges of it, really. Thank you for that one, Chris.
You're welcome.
Terry, what do you got on your mind?
There's a couple things. One, the aging one I found interesting because I've seen certain people mellow.
Yeah.
I've seen certain people I would have said go in the opposite direction, but maybe it's just the stripping away of all of the safeguards around them and them actually showing their true self, right?
Yeah.
So that was one thing.
Mm.
I've had a similar journey to you. I'm very much an introvert. I had to learn to do public speaking. And as a kid, I had a stutter. And stutter's not fully gone away. But having to overcome that in public speaking was another challenge besides just being an introvert. Over time, I've become reasonably decent at public speaking and I found that for me, it was by not taking notes, by just thinking through this subject that I was going to talk about, not writing how I was going to talk about it, and then just talk about it. And then to watch the room, to lean into hopefully the aha moments that they were having around what I was talking, or like maybe just the reactions, like I don't agree, right? And just allowing that to basically be my guide in my public speaking. So those are the two things that I kind of got out of it. And then Colleen and I couldn't but laugh at the very end where he was doing the polar opposite, and the word boring came up because it made me think of our conversation a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
And how that was bang on, right?
I think it was that you didn't have enough personality. Was that right, Colleen? That was what an artist told you?
Yes, very much so.
That was a good laugh we had though around it.
Yes.
Anyways,
Okay.
Those are my sort of things that really stuck. Besides hard yards, I had never heard of that term. Obviously an Aussie term, but I'm going to use it now.
Yeah, me too. I like that.
I like that.
Yeah. Let's respond to a couple of those things. So there was your own journey with introversion and public speaking, and the other observation about some people become more mellow, some people the filters come off, as it were.
Yeah, they just strip away, and you're like, I never realized that person thought that way.
Yeah.
And I've known them for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. It's like, really?
Yeah, exactly. So this is the dark side of Karen's realization, right? This is, and that's why I think we went down that path that we did about talking about taking others into consideration at the same time as not caring so much about what they think. The people you're talking about, Terry, is not caring what other people think and not caring for them either.
I would say that mellow probably actually caring more.
Yeah, the mellow's the opposite. It's the other end that I'm talking about. Yeah. Yeah, the mellow, I don't think you can be mellow, at least if we're using the word in the same way, without humility.
It's on the caring index, right? Everyone's in the 5 or the 4 to 7, and then as they get older, they either go in the 7 to 10 or they go in the 0 to 4 group.
That's what I meant by saying it's people either get better or they get worse.
or it just becomes more honest.
Well, maybe, but let's just say, for example, yeah, not all the things they're revealing are going to be destructive to others, but some of them are. And then if they don't care as well, and if they're losing the capacity to be flexible around it because of aging, then they're a pain in the ass.
I'm not sure that it's that they don't care. They don't understand what they're actually saying.
Yes. Okay. Same. Yeah. But there's still it results in a lack of care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the end result. I'm not saying that it's the intent.
Intent. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Though sometimes it might be as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
But usually you can tell that, right?
Yeah. Usually you can tell. Yeah. So this dropping of there's a social pressure on us all the time, to fit in. And it's important that we do. And then, old people can become very embarrassing to their children and grandchildren because they don't give a shit so much, and they might not care so much about what society thinks, and they say and do things that, the kids and grandkids find embarrassing. So that can be horrifying, or it can be delightful. If you know what I mean. So, but I agree with you. I think this there is this. It's hard to put a name on it, but I like mellow. I don't know what we'll call the other end, but it's not mellow. It's a bit shitty, and it's a bit cranky, like cranky old men sort of thing. And we all hope that we don't end up in that camp, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That we do figure out self-acceptance, but we actually are taking care of the people around us, and we don't judge, because we've figured out ourselves, we don't judge them as harshly morally, which comes back to Chris's point, that, yeah. Now, the other thing, the introversion plus the stutter. I was interested in the way you described it, particularly how you operate when you're publicly speaking, because we share this, having to have navigated a lot of public speaking as an introvert, and I like to say that I do my public speaking as an introvert. And so what I do, I think it's very similar to what you do. When I'm talking, I'm looking for individuals. It's almost like I'm talking to 2 or 3 people. I pick them out of the audience. They're usually the ones who are nodding their heads and smiling. I tend to avert my eyes from the ones who are frowning and shaking their heads, unless I know them. So I make it more like it's a conversation with a few intimates.
I find rules to make people laugh.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
Just to break it, and also to bring everyone else's attention who's wandering away back in. Oh, yeah. What happened? Everyone's laughing. I missed. Yeah. Right?
But what I'm suggesting to you, Terry, is that part of your strategy, which is I think part of mine, is to figure out how does what's an introverted style of public speaking, and I think it's a more intimate, more conversational.
Yeah, I mean,
it's less of a big show,
notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And initially I would have notes, and you would get into these, speech, and you'd skip over notes, and then I look at it after, go, oh, I forgot to do that. Oh, I forgot to do that. And finally, when I threw the notes away, didn't really care.
Yeah, and then it becomes more of a conversation, like a conversation you'd have sitting down with someone, which I think is the more introverted way of going about it. And as it turns out, it's very appealing to people because it feels like you're talking to them.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than reading notes or giving a grand performance.
That's amazing.
Yeah. All right, my friends. So, again, you have not disappointed. We'll have this resonance of Chris's humdinger for a while, and probably
that was Chris. That was pretty big.
Yeah, we'll take that up I'm pretty sure in the next podcast and in the next roundtable on the podcast. But for now, I'd like to thank you so much for doing me the honour of watching the podcast and the questions and observations and reflections. And I'll catch you soon. After, of course, I've written the next podcast. Okay, my friends, take care, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to the Psychology to Live By podcast. If you like the podcast and want to know more, my website is www.drchris.life. There you'll find links to my various social media posts, a newsletter, and lots more. And share the podcast with people you like so they can like it too.